your passion started very young, but when did the green light actually come on to this full time?
So you are right. So I was songwriting by the time I was about 7 years old. So it definitely has always been I always knew it was my calling, but it was always, it's a really scary thing to jump into. Obviously being a musician and being a writer, it's not the most stable, what people would have you think, career choice. Honestly, what ended up happening is I had written some songs. Becoming a military wife was really where it started to develop, because when you're living that lifestyle, you're seeing all these other people, and it's just really extreme, whether it's joy or sadness or grieving or just difficulty. I just feel like the military lifestyle for everyone involved is just an extreme version of civilian lifestyle. So along with that, I'm sure you would know, as an artist yourself, when you're in those situations, the overflow of that emotion tends to come out in your writing. So really, that's where the songwriting just started just flowing. I mean, I was writing songs like crazy, and Soldier's Heart was really written. It was actually written, goodness, back in 2014, I think, and we were in Fort Bragg. And I decided I had finally gotten in touch with some local musicians. Because, moving around so much, it's hard. It's so hard to get a community around you. And so I was lucky enough to meet these incredible musicians who had a really encouraging place, and they did this open mic night. And I went, and, I'm sure in Fayetteville, there's a bunch of Vietnam veterans. That's why they call it Fayetteville. It's very well known for that. So I was doing this open mic, and I played Soldier's Heart, and one of the gentlemen who were there, he recorded it, and he took it back to his support group. And he had a support group, and he is he's very into utilizing art and poetry and stuff like that as a healing element for soldiers and PTSD. And so he took it back to this group, and there was this soldier, I guess, or this Vietnam vet, who was so cold and so guarded. And every time I tell this story, I get emotional, but he had just been so guarded for so long. And he heard the song and he started crying. And so, getting emotional. And so really that's where it hit. That was the green light, is as soon as I found out that it was so much beyond myself, and that there was, there were people out there that were helped by this music. I mean, you can't not pursue that. And so that's really why I do it, is in the hope that, it helps people.
That's the beat of a soldier's heart. That's the beat of a soldier's heart.
As someone who draws on experiences and inspirations to write, how does the song construction begin for you? Is it a lyric? Is it a riff? Is it a combination?
Yeah, most of the time it's a lyric, and it's usually my hook that comes first, which, I guess I'm lucky for that one, because it can be hard to find a hook. But yeah, it really is. It's the hook. I still remember for one of my other songs, Don't Give Up, I was doing some nonprofit work with a cancer research organization, and that's kind of their motto. And I still remember driving into the event that morning, and I just had it in my head, and it was like, don't give up, don't ever give up. And then it was just stuck in my head all day. And so that's really how most of them start. And then, I obviously just build the story around that entire idea.
What advice would you give someone who wants to learn how to play the guitar? You taught yourself to play the guitar, correct? How was that experience for you?
So I taught myself how to play the guitar far before YouTube or any of these online resources. So I hear that YouTube is really, you have some amazing resources there. So, use them. But honestly, what I did, and I think there's something special to be said about this, because I taught myself when I was a teenager. I was fairly young. I think I was about 15, and I had a passion for it. And I think a lot of times what ends up happening is people go into learning an instrument, and it's so rigid to where, you're learning the music theory, and you're just really just diving into all of that. And I think that a lot of times they forget that emotion and passion that led them to that instrument in the first place. So that's my real advice, is to keep tapping into that. So what I did is I listened to a lot of country. 90s country was kind of my jam. And so I would listen to a lot of country. I started listening to, that's when I kind of discovered worship music back in the day. And really what I did is I went to Walmart, because I was in a tiny town. That was like the store we had. I went to a Walmart and I got one of those chord posters that they used to have. I don't even know if they make them anymore, but they had this poster and it had all the chords on it. And I would just start slowly playing to the songs that, I'd print out we did have basic internet back then. So I'd be able to print out the chord charts. And that's how I learned how to play. I just kind of worked on each of the chords, and bless my parents' hearts, my guitar was not in tune for the first 6 months of playing. And so I was learning how to play on an untuned guitar. So big surprise, my Christmas present that year was a brand new guitar, and I also learned how to tune it. So that was good.
As a military wife, there's a lot of camaraderie, as much as there is amongst the enlisted and commissioned men and women who serve. But how has being a member of that community helped your career?
Oh man, stories and connection. It really is. I think that especially I think that social media has its pros and cons, but I think one of the cons to social media is that, people just aren't connecting face to face anymore. And I think that one of the biggest things that we tend to forget is, I don't know, there's like this separation that happens, I guess. And one of the biggest things with being a military wife and having that camaraderie, I was essentially like the really cool aunt to a lot of my military wife friends, because they were all moms and I didn't have kids yet. We still don't have kids, and so I was available. And so when my husband was gone, I would go and I would help out the other wives. And I think the biggest thing with that is that your friends and the women around you, especially those that have husbands deployed at the same time, they really become your family. And I think there's something special to that. I think that there's also an element to that. The biggest thing that I learned is kind of look beyond what you're used to. We always have a tendency to put labels on people. And, once you label them, it's like, oh, I wouldn't get along with them because, this, and this. They're just not in my, they're not in my wheelhouse, whatever. Right. So, but that's one of the biggest things that I honestly learned, is that I don't want to say forced, but you have these intense opportunities to really get to know people who are drastically different than you. And it's so amazing. One of my best friends is this. She's an older gal, and she is from New Jersey, and she is city, and she is blingy, and she's this gorgeous African-American woman. And her and I just come from completely opposite worlds. And that's one of the beautiful things that, I had the ability to experience, because I'm from a very rural community on the West Coast. And so having that opportunity to really look beyond what you think certain labels are and actually really get to know the people around you, which is something I think a lot of people could learn from.
What was the recording studio experience like for you?
So what's really funny, it was actually in my house. So so it was an amazing opportunity. It's really funny how the whole thing came together. So obviously, you'll see from a lot of my stuff, I'm a Christian. And one of the things I always tell people is with the whole recording process, it really was God timing. I didn't want to do it. Like, if you would have asked me this time last year if I was going to have a single, anything like that, I would have told you were nuts. And so there was the producing company that came, they were traveling. And so they would travel, and the whole idea was to do these live recordings. And so, I prayed about it, and I decided everything, came together. We decided to do it in my house because we were in the middle of moving. And so all of my stuff was out. And so I just had these gigantic rooms. And so we picked the room, with the best acoustics, and we just set up. And so I ended up getting a couple of the guys that I would lead worship with. They were both soldiers, and I loved the opportunity to give that to them. These guys are serving their country. More than likely, they're not going to be able to go and and record music. And so I decided, I was like, hey guys, like, let's just all get together and jam on this and, you know, just see what comes out of it. And so that's what we did. And it was great. And we did it all in one day. If I had to choose again, I would definitely take a few days to do it. My voice is pretty much gone by the last song. But it really was, you know, it's really interesting coming in as a songwriter into recording experiences, because what you bring into it isn't necessarily what comes out. You know, I think one of the biggest things going into it that I really loved is getting the group together and just, you know, we had made a couple tweaks to a few of the songs. And one of those tweaks was just having a guitar on Soldier's Heart. And it turned out amazing. And so what happens creatively when you get artists together, I think is so special and so awesome. And that was by far my favorite part of the recording process.
What do you cherish most about being an indie artist?
Having my own sound. And I hope that doesn't sound too cynical. It's really not. It's just having, I know you probably understand that. You know, I don't want to diss, you know, pop radio. Hey, those people do what they do and it's great. People love it. It's just, you know, it's just not a good fit, I guess, for me. So, that's the thing is maintaining my own sound, my own music, something unique. And really, I think part of also being an indie artist is just enjoying, I feel like I get to enjoy the process a lot more. I get really in depth with all the different things that you have to do in order to, you know, do this business. And I enjoy that. I enjoy looking at all of it, as opposed to, you know, I'd imagine if a record label signed or something like that, you know, I'm sure I wouldn't be doing as much. But yeah, I love having my own sound and being able to just, I don't know, to just kind of sit in that and just collect stories. And I don't know, to me, it just feels more naturally artistic, if that makes sense, as opposed to like big marketing.
What's one principle you think from the military that the music business should adopt and that they would benefit from?
Oh, yes, I would honestly say respect. You know, and again, it's like, I hope this doesn't sound cynical at all, but it's more of me honoring, you know, what I've seen and heard in the military. And again, I feel like you kind of step out of it, and you know, there's pros and cons to everything. There's definitely cons to the military too, and you know, it's, you know, the moving often, and there's the whole thing with the Army, and everyone says, you know, being disorganized. You could talk crap about it all day long, but the one thing I will say is the people that I've met that really exemplify what I feel the military honors is these people are heroes in their own right. Their stories will never be told. You know, it's stuff that it's stuff that can't necessarily be publicized, and they do it. They do it because they just want to serve, and they're so selfless. And the amount of honor and respect that they have is just, it's so moving. Like I say, it's like I get emotional even talking about that, just because it's so overwhelming to see that. And I think that that's something that the music industry, you know, I think that they could look at that and see a great example in, you know, selflessness. And it's like, why are you really doing this? Is it to, you know, and I think just honoring the heart behind those things, you know, as opposed to just looking at capitalism and that paycheck and like how, you know, all of that. It's like, why are we doing this? And really understanding that music has power. I think that so often we get stuck in this thing where it's just all capitalism and pumping out song after song after song just to match like what you're selling. And just this reminder that, you know, what you put out there makes a difference. Whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, what you put out there makes a difference, for good or bad. And I think just having that responsibility and remembering, you know, if you're in a position where you can change, you know, there's been songs that have changed the way we think about things.